It was just another ordinary morning inside a downtown bank. Sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows, reflecting off polished floors. Customers stood in neat lines, checking their phones, chatting quietly, and waiting for their turn at the counter. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt dangerous. Jason Statham walked in calmly, wearing a simple jacket and dark glasses. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. He took a form from the desk, filled it out carefully, and stood near the back of the line. No one paid him much attention. To everyone else, he was just another customer. A mother whispered to her child to stand still. An elderly man adjusted his cap. The soft hum of the air conditioner filled the room. The bank felt safe. Then, without warning, the front doors slammed open. 3 masked men rushed inside, their movements loud and chaotic. One of them shouted for everyone to stay where they were. Another jumped over the counter, causing gasps to ripple through the room. Panic spread instantly. People froze. Some dropped their bags. Others raised their hands without being told. Jason slowly lifted his hands like everyone else. But his eyes were different. Calm, focused, observing. The robbers yelled orders. Clearly nervous and unorganized. One of them slipped slightly on the floor. Another argued with his partner about which door to block. Their voices shook with fear, even as they tried to sound in control. Jason noticed everything. Their positions, their mistakes, the way they kept glancing at each other for reassurance. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply watched. A robber pointed at him and shouted, "You! Sit down, don't try anything." Jason nodded and sat slowly, exactly as instructed. To the robbers, he looked cooperative. Harmless, just another hostage. But what they didn't know, what no one in that bank knew, was that this calm man had faced far worse situations than this. Situations where panic meant failure. Situations where silence was power. As the robbers began stuffing money into bags, Jason leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, because the biggest mistake the robbers made was thinking they were in control. They had no idea who they had just taken hostage. The moment the bank doors slammed shut, the atmosphere completely changed. What had been a place of routine and comfort turned into a room full of fear. The robbers moved fast, but not smoothly. Their voices were loud, shaky, desperate. They shouted instructions that didn't always make sense, pointing in different directions, stepping over each other's paths. "Everyone on the floor, phones down," one of them yelled. Customers obeyed instantly. A pen rolled across the floor. Someone's bag tipped over, spilling papers everywhere. A quiet sob came from near the counter. Jason Statham lowered himself to the ground with everyone else. Slow, controlled, calm. He didn't rush, and he didn't hesitate. From the outside, he looked compliant. Ordinary, forgettable. But inside, his mind was already working. He noticed how one robber kept pacing near the door, constantly checking outside. Nervous, inexperienced. Another robber was focused only on the money, stuffing bills into bags without watching the room. The third tried to act tough, but his hands trembled every time he shouted. Jason adjusted his position slightly, careful not to draw attention. He angled himself so he could see reflections in the glass wall behind the counter. He didn't stare. He glanced. Small movements. Nothing obvious. A robber kicked a chair out of the way. "Don't look at us," he yelled. Jason lowered his gaze immediately. Obedient, harmless. The robbers thought fear gave them control. They were wrong. Fear made them sloppy. One customer quietly tried to reach for her phone. A robber snapped at her, voice cracking. Jason watched the exchange carefully, measuring distance, timing, and reactions. Not to act yet. Not now. The tension thickened with every passing second. Outside, faint sirens could be heard in the distance. One robber panicked. "Did you call the cops?" he shouted at the room. Everyone shook their heads. Jason remained still. The robber near the door whispered urgently to the others. Their plan was already unraveling. They weren't prepared for time pressure. They weren't prepared for resistance. And they definitely weren't prepared for someone who stayed calm when everyone else was breaking. Jason slowly exhaled, steadying his breath. He wasn't scared. He was patient. A robber pointed at him again. "You move over there, slowly." Jason complied without hesitation. He moved exactly where he was told, careful and precise. His calmness confused them. Most hostages begged, some cried, some froze. Jason did none of that. He sat down again, resting his hands on his knees, eyes lowered. To the robbers, he looked like the least dangerous person in the room. But to anyone watching closely, there was something different about him. The way he listened, the way he waited, the way he never wasted a single movement. The robber, stuffing money into the bag, dropped a bundle. He cursed loudly. Jason's eyes flicked up for half a second, just enough to notice how close the exit was, how clear the path could be if things shifted. Still, he stayed still, because real power doesn't rush. At this point, let me ask you something. If you were trapped in that bank right now, would you panic? Or stay calm? And tell me in the comments, which country or city are you watching this story from? Back inside the bank, the robbers argued quietly among themselves. Time was slipping away, and they could feel it. Their confidence faded with every second. Jason Statham sat silently among the hostages, waiting. Because when the moment came, everything would change. Minutes passed, but inside the bank, time felt frozen. The robbers grew louder, yet less confident. One kept glancing at the doors. Another argued in a low voice about the bags not being full enough. The third tried to sound in control, barking orders that echoed off the walls, but his voice cracked every time he spoke. Fear filled the room like heavy air. Jason Statham remained seated on the floor, his posture relaxed, his breathing steady. While everyone else focused on the robbers shouting, Jason focused on something else entirely. Patterns, movements, mistakes. He noticed how the robber near the counter never checked behind him. He noticed how the one at the door stood too close to the glass, constantly distracted by the street outside. And he noticed how none of them were working together anymore. That was important. A loud crash echoed as one robber knocked over a small table. A woman gasped, a child whimpered. The robber froze, suddenly aware of how close panic was to turning into chaos. "Quiet," he shouted, louder than necessary. Jason slowly shifted his position just a few inches. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough to improve his angle. His eyes flicked briefly to the reflection in the glass again. Still clear. Still possible. A robber walked past him and stopped. For a moment, Jason thought he'd drawn attention, but the robber only scoffed. "Don't even think about trying something," he said, trying to sound intimidating. Jason looked up briefly, his expression calm and unreadable. "I won't," he replied softly. That calm response unsettled the robber more than fear ever could. He hesitated, then walked away, shaking his head. Jason lowered his gaze again. Inside, his mind stayed sharp. He wasn't waiting for chaos. He was waiting for an opening, one that wouldn't put innocent people at risk. Every second mattered. Every move had to be precise. Another argument broke out between the robbers. "We don't have time. We need more. Just grab what you can." Their voices overlapped, tension rising. That unity they had at the beginning was gone. Jason subtly adjusted his breathing. Slow in, slow out. The room felt like a tightly wound spring. Then something small, but important, happened. The robber near the door stepped away to answer a call on a buzzing phone. He turned his back on the room, just for a moment. Jason noticed. Across the bank, one of the money bags tore slightly, spilling bills onto the floor. The robber cursed again and bent down to pick them up, completely distracted. For the first time since the robbery began, no one was fully watching the room. Jason didn't move yet. He waited, because acting too early would ruin everything. If you were inside that bank right now, would you stay completely still, or would you look for the right moment to act? Tell me in the comments, walk away or stand your ground. Back inside the story, the tension grew thicker. A siren echoed faintly again. Closer this time. One robber panicked. "They're coming. I told you we should have left." Another snapped back. "Relax, we're still in control." But they weren't. Jason slowly placed one hand on the floor, steadying himself. His movements were so subtle that no one noticed. To the robbers, he was still just another quiet hostage. But the crowd sensed something. A man nearby glanced at Jason, confused by his calm. A woman noticed the way Jason watched without staring, without fear. The bank felt like it was holding its breath. The robber at the counter turned abruptly, waving his arm. Everyone stay down. As he did, he stepped back, right into the space he hadn't checked. Jason's eyes sharpened. Not yet. A child's toy skidded across the floor, accidentally kicked. The sound made everyone flinch. The robbers spun around, shouting over each other. That was the moment. Not an explosion, not a fight, just a shift. Jason leaned forward slightly, his posture changing in a way that was impossible to ignore. Calm, controlled, ready. The robbers didn't notice right away. But the air did. Something was about to happen. And when it did, the people in that bank would realize the truth. The most dangerous person in the room was the one who never raised his voice. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Jason Statham's posture changed just enough for a few nearby hostages to notice. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't reacting out of fear. He was preparing. Calmly. Quietly. With purpose. The robbers were too distracted to see it. One of them was still arguing near the counter, frustrated by the torn bag and scattered bills. Another paced near the door, peeking through the glass, nervously watching the street outside. The third kept trying to control the room with loud commands that sounded less convincing with every second. Jason watched them all. He noticed how the robber near the door kept leaving a clear path open. He noticed how the counter robber never looked to his left. And most importantly, he noticed how their attention never stayed in one place for more than a second. That's when Jason made his first real move. He didn't jump. He didn't rush. He simply shifted position, slowly guiding a nearby elderly man and a frightened child a little farther back, using nothing but quiet gestures. No one spoke. No one panicked. They moved because something about Jason felt reassuring. The crowd sensed it too. A woman whispered, barely audible, "What is he doing?" No one answered. The robber near the counter suddenly turned. "Hey, everyone stays where they are." Jason froze instantly, hands visible, expression calm. "Of course," he said softly. The robber hesitated. Something about Jason bothered him, the lack of fear, the steady eyes. But he brushed it off and turned away again. Big mistake. Jason glanced at the reflection in the glass one more time. The angle was still clear. The timing was right. Outside, sirens echoed again. Closer now. Panic surged through the robbers. "We're out of time," one whispered urgently. "Just grab the bags and go." Another snapped back. Their plan was collapsing. Jason slowly stood up, not suddenly, not aggressively, just enough to be noticed. "Sit down," the robber near the door shouted, raising his voice. Jason met his eyes calmly. "There's a safer way to end this," Jason said. His tone even, controlled. The room went quiet. The robbers stared at him, stunned. Not by the words, but by the confidence behind them. "Who do you think you are?" one demanded. Jason didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, at the frightened people, the scattered money, the tension hanging thick in the air. "I'm someone who doesn't want anyone to get hurt," he said. The robber laughed nervously. "You think you're in charge now?" Jason took a slow step forward. No threats, no anger, just presence. That's when the dynamic changed. The robbers realized something was wrong. But they couldn't explain it. The man they thought was harmless didn't look like a hostage anymore. He looked composed, calculated. Jason spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "You're surrounded. You're nervous. And you're making mistakes." The robber near the counter tightened his grip on the bag. "Stay back." Jason stopped instantly, respecting the distance. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to stop this from getting worse." Silence followed. The crowd watched in disbelief. No shouting, no chaos. Just one calm man standing in the middle of a collapsing robbery. The robber near the door whispered to the others. "Something's off about him." Jason heard it. He allowed a faint smile, not confident, not arrogant, knowing. "You picked the wrong place," he said quietly, "and the wrong day." The robbers exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time since they burst into the bank, doubt crossed their faces. Who was this man? Why wasn't he afraid? Why did it feel like he was the one in control? Jason took one step back, giving them space, letting the weight of the moment sink in. That's when one robber finally asked the question they should have asked from the beginning. "Who are you?" Jason didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was far more powerful than fear. And when it came out, everything would change. The question hung in the air. "Who are you?" Jason Statham didn't answer. He simply stood there calm and motionless, letting silence do what shouting never could. The robbers waited for a reaction. Fear, excuses, panic. But none came. That silence began to press on them, heavier than any threat. Outside, the sirens were unmistakable now. Closer, louder. One robber snapped, trying to reclaim control. Enough, everyone back on the floor now. Most people obeyed instantly. Jason didn't move. Not because he was defying them, but because he was choosing his moment carefully. "You're running out of time," Jason said calmly. "And you know it." The robber near the door clenched his fists. "Stop talking." Jason raised his hand slightly, showing he wasn't a threat. "I'm talking so no one gets hurt," he replied. "Including you." That shook them. The robbers had expected resistance or fear. Not concern, not confidence. Certainly not advice. The one at the counter whispered harshly, "Why is he so calm?" Jason took a slow step to the side, positioning himself between the robbers and the hostages. Subtle, protective, deliberate. A few people noticed and instinctively moved closer behind him. The crowd trusted him. The robbers felt it and hated it. "Sit down," the leader shouted again, his voice cracking. Jason finally shook his head. "You don't want this to go any further." In a flash of panic, one robber lunged forward, trying to intimidate him. Jason reacted instantly, but safely. He sidestepped, guiding the robber off balance with controlled movement. No harm, no violence. The robber stumbled back, shocked and embarrassed. Gasps filled the room. That single moment changed everything. The robbers froze. The hostages realized this wasn't an ordinary man. Jason didn't pursue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't escalate. He simply stood still again, centered, composed, like nothing had happened. "You see," Jason said calmly, "this doesn't need to get worse." The robber who stumbled stared at him, breathing hard. What was that?" Jason met his eyes. A warning. Fear finally showed on their faces. They backed away slightly, tightening their grip on the bags, but loosening their grip on control. Jason spoke again, voice low but steady. "You came here thinking fear would protect you. It won't. Calm decisions will." The leader glanced at the door, at the windows, at the people behind Jason. The balance had shifted, and he knew it. The room was quiet now. No shouting. No chaos. Just tension. Then something unexpected happened. One of the robbers lowered his arm, just a little. Jason noticed instantly. "That's the right choice," he said. "Put the bag down." The robber hesitated. Sirens blared directly outside. That was it. The leader swallowed hard. "We're done," he muttered. The bag hit the floor. Relief washed over the room, but no one moved. Everyone waited for Jason. Jason stepped aside slowly, raising his hands again. "Everyone stays calm," he said to the hostages. "This is over." The robbers dropped their bags one by one. No chaos, no injuries, no panic. Just surrender, as police voices echoed outside. The robbers lowered themselves to the floor, stunned and silent. Jason exhaled slowly. The danger had passed, but the questions remained. The officers rushed in moments later, securing the scene. They glanced at Jason, then at the surrendered robbers, confused by how peacefully it had ended. One officer paused, staring at Jason more closely. Recognition flickered across his face. "Wait a second," he said quietly. Jason met his eyes. And in that moment, the truth was about to come out. Because the man who just ended a bank robbery without chaos was not who anyone thought he was. The bank fell into a strange, unreal silence. Police officers moved carefully through the doors, securing the room, guiding customers to safety. The robbers stayed on the floor, stunned, their confidence completely gone. Everyone kept glancing at Jason Statham. The calm man standing at the center of it all. One officer stepped closer, studying him more carefully now, not with suspicion, with recognition. He paused, lowered his voice and said, "Sir, can I ask your name?" Jason looked at him calmly. "Jason," he replied. The officer's eyes widened just a little. Another officer joined them, whispering something urgently. They exchanged looks, serious, cautious, respectful. The atmosphere shifted again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was realization. The second officer cleared his throat. "Everyone, please remain calm," he announced. "You're all safe now." But his eyes never left Jason. One of the robbers looked up, confused. "What's going on?" he muttered. The officer didn't answer him. Instead, he turned to Jason and spoke quietly. "We didn't expect to see you here." Jason gave a faint nod. "Neither did I." That was when the truth began to spread. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a few whispered words between officers. People in the bank started noticing the change. The way the police stood straighter, the way their tone shifted from command to respect. Phones quietly rose again, capturing the moment. A man near the back whispered, "Who is he?" Another answered softly, I think he's someone important." Jason finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Let's keep this quiet. These people have been through enough." The officer nodded immediately. Of course, that single exchange said everything. The robbers realized it too. One of them swallowed hard. "Wait, you're not just some guy, are you?" Jason turned to him, his expression steady. "I'm someone who values order," he said, "and today you brought chaos into the wrong place." No threats, no anger, just truth. The color drained from the robber's face. He had heard that tone before. Not from police, not from ordinary people, from men who didn't need to shout to be obeyed. The whispers grew louder now. "That's Jason Statham. He's not just a businessman. I heard he runs everything behind the scenes." The idea spread quickly, but Jason raised his hand slightly. "That's enough," he said. "Labels don't matter." He looked around the room, making sure every customer was safe. "Everyone here did the right thing by staying calm," he added. "That's why this ended peacefully. If you were watching this unfold in real life, would you step forward to help, or stay back and observe? Tell me in the comments. What would you do?" The officers escorted the robbers away, their heads low, confidence shattered, not by force, but by presence. One of them glanced back at Jason one last time, fear mixed with disbelief. "I thought we were in control," he whispered. Jason replied calmly, "That's a common mistake." The bank manager approached, shaken but grateful. "Sir, thank you. You saved lives today." Jason shook his head. Everyone here saved themselves by staying calm. Outside, flashing lights reflected against the glass windows. News crews were already gathering, trying to understand how a dangerous situation ended without chaos. An officer leaned closer to Jason. "This is going to attract attention." Jason adjusted his jacket. "It always does," he said quietly, "but today isn't about me." He looked back at the bank, at the people hugging their families, at the relief on their faces. The officer nodded. "We will." Jason turned toward the exit, walking past the cameras, past the noise, past the questions. Just another man leaving a building. But everyone inside knew the truth now. The robbers hadn't lost because of force. They hadn't lost because of weapons. They lost because they underestimated the calmest man in the room. And as Jason disappeared into the crowd, one thing was clear. They didn't just take a hostage. They crossed paths with a man who ruled from the shadows. By the time Jason Statham stepped outside the bank, the street had transformed. Police cars lined the road. Their lights painted the buildings in red and blue. A small crowd had gathered behind the safety barriers, whispering, pointing, trying to understand what had just happened inside. News cameras were setting up, reporters speaking rapidly into microphones. Yet Jason walked out quietly. No rush. No dramatic gestures. No need for attention. Inside the bank, customers were being escorted out one by one. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others hugged their families tightly, grateful that what could have been a tragedy had ended peacefully. Almost all of them looked back toward Jason before leaving, as if trying to lock the moment into memory. A woman approached him, her hands shaking. "Sir, I don't even know how to thank you," she said. Jason gave her a gentle nod. "You stayed calm. That's what mattered." Another man spoke up. "You stood between us and danger. You didn't even know us." Jason replied simply, "Someone on had to." That was all. No speeches. No credit taken. The officers nearby watched him with a mix of respect and caution. They knew who he was now. They knew the kind of influence he carried. But they also knew something else. He hadn't used any of it. He hadn't made calls. He hadn't given orders. He hadn't revealed his name until it was unavoidable. He had led without force. The robbers were driven away quietly, their heads lowered, the weight of realization heavy on their shoulders. They hadn't been defeated by strength or weapons, but by discipline and presence, a lesson they would never forget. As the scene calmed, a reporter finally called out, "Sir, do you have any comment about what happened today?" Jason stopped for a moment. He turned, not toward the camera, but toward the people behind it. "This wasn't about me," he said calmly. "It was about keeping people safe. That's it." Then he walked away. Do you believe real power is loud or quiet? Tell me in the comments what you think. Within hours, the story spread everywhere. Headlines didn't focus on chaos or fear. They focused on one thing: a bank robbery ended without violence. Because one man stayed calm. Online comments flooded in. He didn't panic. He didn't show off. That's what real leadership looks like. But Jason didn't read them. He returned to his normal routine, blending back into the city like nothing extraordinary had happened. To the world, it was a viral story. To him, it was just another reminder of a simple truth: power doesn't need permission. And it doesn't need noise. True control is knowing when to act and when to stay silent. That day, a group of robbers walked into a bank believing fear made them powerful. They walked out knowing better. Because the most dangerous person in the room was the one who never raised his voice. If you enjoyed this calm but powerful story, like the video, subscribe for more suspenseful stories, and comment, "Control if you believe true strength comes from discipline, not chaos."